We've had loads of questions in advance of filming this today, so I actually think there's going to be tons that you can help people with. So one that cropped up a couple of times is just, where can people search for shared ownership homes? What would you recommend for that side of things?
Well, obviously the Square Roots website is the number one place to start. So you'll be able to, from there, see all our current developments and also all our up and coming developments as well. We also have an affordability calculator on our website, which a lot of buyers have found helpful. Just although it's not to the detail of having an initial financial assessment with a financial advisor, it at least gives you just a bit of an idea. You can play around with kind of the full market value, the share that you buy, the mortgage term as well. So it's just a good little tool to help you buyers understand kind of roughly what they can afford.
Fantastic. And then from my end, I would obviously suggest the Share to Buy website where I work, where I come from, and we are the country's leading #1 first-time buyer property portal. So we do a lot of shared ownership all across the country, developments from the very north to the very south, including obviously the Square Roots developments as well. And then where they can meet Censeo is also at our London Home Show event, and you guys are always there, Square Roots are always there. We host this in Westminster twice a year, so that's spring and autumn, as you all know. And it's a bit of a one-stop shop really, so there's brokers, there's solicitors, there's housing providers, and you can have all your questions answered. So they'd be my suggestions. And then one that did come in quite a lot from them, people submitting their questions, is around service charges, what they are and how they're calculated when you buy a shared ownership property.
The service charge is calculated the same way if you're buying any kind of leasehold property that has an element of communal space. You're always really going to have it on a leasehold property. So we only work with the best managing agents in the business. Also as well, what we do that a lot of other housing providers don't do is that once everyone's moved in, we have a customer community charter, so everyone can join that and they can feed back in their experience with living in the building and development if things aren't being picked up. So if bins should be emptied more regularly or cleaning of the communal corridors, we take that feedback on from Square Roots' point of view. Square Roots is the management company, we are the freeholder, so it is our asset as well, so we want to make sure it's looked after. So the service charges is something that we really do kind of really dig down into, making sure that we're providing the best quality for the buyers.
I love that. So you have like an open forum for your tenants and your residents to come in and sort of just give their own feedback on the development where they're living every day. That's so important. I think that's a really nice kind of addition to for the residents.
Always try and put on a residents event so everyone can meet each other. We want them to engage with each other, create that, or expand on that community, and really just make sure that they're living in the best possible environment.
Brilliant. And so we're covering here service charges. For anyone that isn't 100% sure, like they might have seen the term but not know exactly what that is or what's included in that, could you just give a little bit of information?
So the service charge is really, it's the upkeep and the maintenance of the communal parts. So if you've got a lift, it will be kind of the maintenance of the lift, the maintenance of the communal areas, the cleaning, the landscaping. Obviously we've got this lovely 5th floor podium, so it's kind of maintain the landscaping there. Other things that you don't think about, sort of buildings insurance, the other insurances that go into there. So it's just really making sure that everything is looked after, basically outside of the confines of your apartments.
That's a really good way to look at it. So service charge is your communal areas, your communal facilities, and then with new builds you'll have warranties that you have for the actual apartment itself.
Yeah, so then internally you have your usually a 10 or 12 year building warranty, and that is is a warranty for the materials that are used within the building. As mentioned earlier, Square Roots are backed by London Square, award-winning developer. We then also give 2-year customer warranty as well. So if anything does go wrong within the apartment that is a clear defect, then we will come back in within those 2 years, make sure it's fixed, and make sure that is working properly for the residents.
It's so good to know you're covered. And Rupi, anything you wanted to add on the service charges side of things from a broker's point of view?
Well, I suppose there's been a lot of talk about service charges and leaseholds and everything. It's always in the news and people get the wrong idea about it. Firstly, most flats are leaseholds, and whether it's shared ownership or just an outright purchase, you're going to have a leasehold. Secondly, most come with a service charge because someone has to pay for communal areas. But if you take into account a bank will own most of that property because they're lending you the money to buy that property, they're going to own most of it. And as an owner or part owner with you, they're not going to agree to buying that property unless they're happy with the service charge that's being asked for. So when people think, oh, that might be a bit expensive, is that reasonable service charge? Let me assure you, the valuation done on that property by the bank will make sure you're getting good value. Otherwise, they're not going to lend on it. Your lender basically safeguards your interest because they own the property as well.
And I think that's actually something that people don't always realise. They often think that leasehold in itself is only for shared ownership, but it is all flats.
All flats.
Yeah.
Most flats.
Yeah,
now
majority.
are leasehold. They've extended, the reforms came in with leases now longer, so they're not running out, early. But most flats in the UK are leasehold. So it's not just shared ownership.
I think, and with leasehold, so all our square roots developments, all our leases are a minimum of 990 years. So in essence, it is virtual freehold. There's no ground rents anymore as well. So this was with the lease reforms. These were the two very big points where ground rents were doubling every couple of years. So we can't charge ground rent anymore, which is great for buyers. You've got long leases, so you don't have to worry about the lease expiring or having to pay a huge amount of money to extend the lease. So it's the leasehold becoming a lot more attractive proposition for buyers as well. And as I say, most new build developments are leases.
Many of the issues that you had in the past are here now, and hence buying new build is quite favourable.
Brilliant. And then can I ask, Alex, what do you think sets Square Roots apart from other shared ownership providers? So how do you approach London living for your residents?
I think we want to make sure that we're building in places that we will live, and it's London living without sacrifice. So we make sure that all our Square Roots homes are delivered to the best possible standard for the area. If you compare to from a London Square point of view, who we're backed by, you see it's a very similar standard of specification. The appliances are the same. The staff that we use from a customer care perspective are the same across both Square Roots and London Square. We're not offering a lesser product. Our ethos is that we are just trying to provide an alternative way for people to buy a London Square home, and that's where Square Roots comes in.
That's such an important point, that shared ownership isn't a lesser product, it's just an alternative. So, just because you can't buy on the open market doesn't mean you can't buy, doesn't mean you can't find a home to call your own. I think that's a really important aspect of shared ownership. It makes housing more accessible, especially for first-time buyers, especially in the current climate where, it is difficult. So it's nice to know there's that alternative out there.
It's just another product. I mean, you've got freehold. If you've got all the cash in the world, just buy something outright. You can buy a leasehold, you can social rent, you can have private rent. Just another way to buy it. No one's forcing anyone to buy it this way. And every tenure comes with its own problems. You could buy a house for cash tomorrow and the roof falls over. There's always going to be an issue and nothing's perfect, but it's on the way to full home ownership if you want it. And it's a choice. You don't have to do it, but it's a good choice to have.
I think buying in itself is just so overwhelming, or seems overwhelming, for especially first-time buyers who've never gone through the process, or who potentially have parents that bought but many years ago. So, lots might have changed since then. What kind of advice would you give to people looking to buy their first home through shared ownership?
What a lot of people don't realise is that shared ownership has been around for a long time. I think it's been around for nearly over 40 years now. So we are starting to see a generation coming through where their parents have actually bought on shared ownership and they have recommended it. And we mentioned about kind of the leasehold reforms where there was a certain stigma towards shared ownership, but it wasn't about shared ownership. It was about the leasehold side of things, whereas now we had a particular buyer at our Kingston development whose mum actually bought on shared ownership and saw Square Roots Kingston and recommended her daughter to come along and look at it. So we're starting to see that second generation coming through of shared ownership buyers, and I think that's what's key, to have people that come in, buy a shared ownership property, have a good experience with a housing provider that knows what they're doing, that that is in it for the long run to make sure that they are building a brand. And yeah, it just allows kind of that shared ownership brand as well to build.
Rupi, do you have any kind of advice there of if someone's watching this that just feels like so overwhelmed by it, what your advice would be?
I think go to a specialist for your advice as well. For the shared ownership, on the purchase, go to a specialist like Square Roots. For the mortgage, go to a specialist, obviously like Censeo, but we have colleagues in other firms, but make sure they're a specialist because, it makes up around 2 to 3% of the market. And if you're not doing it all the time, you could get things wrong. And also with the solicitors, go to a specialist. They understand what the plot looks like. They understand how the leases work. So one, use specialists in that area. Secondly, do your research. Make sure you're happy, because when you get the keys to that house, there's no turning back. So take your time, do your research, talk to specialists, and ask the silly questions that you're embarrassed to ask.
I think that not that it's a silly question, but I think there are some times that when people hear shared ownership, the first thing that they think is that they're sharing the property with someone else, and they're actually renting it with someone else. That's not the case at all. So the share section of it is because you're buying a share of the property. You're buying 25% or 50%, and then you're paying rent on the share that you don't own, but you live in it as you do on your own. It is yours. I think that's the big one. Other questions as well is especially for Square Roots, can you have a pet in the property? We all our developments are pet friendly, so it would just be the case of when you are buying a property to fill out a pet request form, and then that goes over to the managing agent just so that they're aware that there are pets on the property. But yeah, as I say, just ask the questions and ask an expert, because they'll be able to give you the best advice as well.
That's a really good answer, because actually you've covered a few of the other questions that came in. So can I have pets? Always comes up. It's a really popular question. We're a country of animal lovers. And also, do I have to share with a stranger? And that's, I think, a very common misconception. Do I have to buy with someone else? Do I have to share like roommates that you've never met before? I think it's really important to know that share is because you're buying a share and sharing ownership with the housing provider. So in this case, Square Roots London Square. I think that's just really, really good for people to know. A question we had a lot was about, once someone's bought a shared ownership property, can they increase the amount they own? So if they buy 25% at the start, are they locked into that 25%? Can they ever own 100%?
Yeah, so it's called staircasing, which some people may not be familiar with if you are starting to look into shared ownership, the terminology. But yeah, it's staircasing, so it allows you to, in increments, to buy more shares. So it's not just a product where when you come in you buy 25% and you can solely only ever own 25%. It's there for people to build equity, to be able to staircase up to 100% if they want to. With all our Square Roots developments, we allow buyers to staircase up to 100%. That is one thing that I would say is to check with the housing provider, because there are some restrictions within the lease that doesn't allow you to staircase to 100%. But all our Square Roots development allows you to do that, and you can do that over time with either saving money to then buy in cash, or you can then look at your your mortgage and looking at changing the mortgage product.
Again, using a specialist, we have a scheme where someone does a mortgage with us, we give them a lifetime mortgage. So next year we've got nearly 1,000 people coming back to remortgage. When we talk about the remortgage, whether they stay with a lender, move to another lender, because along the way, the mortgage is going to last you 25, 30 years. So if you can build in a review every 2 to 5 years, which the normal mortgage term is, come in, and then we'll talk about staircasing. Because at the time, it's usually about affordability. Can you afford to buy more shares? And we'll calculate that for someone. And, working with Square Roots every 2 years or 5 years, when your mortgagee comes back to us, we'll be talking about staircasing. We'll be talking about getting cheaper rates. That makes everything more sustainable and also gives them a bit more financial inclusion. If you can buy more of an appreciating asset, it doesn't do you any harm in the long term. In the short term, it might, because things go up and down in value, but over the long term, you should be in a better position.
If someone is living as a shared owner in a shared ownership property and they do choose to staircase, Are there any sort of limitations or conditions that they should be aware of?
Not so much limitations, but definitely there's procedures for it. So with every housing provider works slightly differently, but with Square Roots, it'd be the case of coming back to our customer care team, advising that you would like to staircase, and then it'd be the case of getting independent valuation on the property. So it's not Square Roots determining how much they're paying for the share. It's completely independent, and that surveyor will then determine the value for the property. So if you're looking to staircase in 10%, 25%, then you know how much it costs. And then it'd just be the case of then going through the conveyancing, because you'll be updating the lease. And then also if you are looking to kind of release equity or remortgage, then it'd be using a mortgage broker, a financial advisor. And again, we've got panel solicitors that deal with both buying from initial percentage, but then also staircasing as well. And again, the financial advisors. So the overall process, it's shorter than if you were buying it originally, but it still does take a bit of time just to go through kind of that process. But you're looking about a month in terms of from start to finish of going through the process.
So you mentioned evaluation there. So when you buy an extra share, that's not based on the price of the property when you bought initially. It's going to be based on the current market value.
Yeah, correct. So that which is again depending on if you're there and the market does change, you can time it really well with as a shared owner. If the market isn't as strong as it was when you bought, then you're in a great position, because you're potentially buying a share at a cheaper rate that you were when you initially bought your first share. So it does help, and it fluctuates, but it's about finding the right time, but also the right time for the buyer just financially, when they have that money to be able to do it. And at the end of the day, even if you are buying you're staircasing at a higher level, you're owning more equity of the property, which means that you're paying less rent on the share that obviously you don't own.
I mean, also, it's a mathematical exercise, and you have to be totally transparent. Property prices do go up and down, but over a long term, what we've seen over the last 30, 40 years is there's a nice growth there, and hence people want to buy a property, not just rent. And you buy a share of it, you buy extra shares in the future. Again, every couple of years, take a view and see if you can afford extra shares. And you'll only do it if it's a viable proposition for you at the time.
Brilliant. So we're talking about staircasing here and, buying more shares in your property. With Square Roots, is there a time limit on when you can start to staircase? Can you do it immediately? Do you have to wait a certain amount of time?
We don't say there's a time limit. It really then it comes down to more of mortgage side of things and your lender, how they feel comfortable. Also as well with land registry, it takes some time for you to be recognised as on the title of that property. So that usually to go through land registry at the moment from COVID, there has been a bit of a backlog, so it can take up to 6 months for your name to go on the title. But then also there's lenders out there that like to see a good kind of 6 months of repayments before you start to look at a change in kind of the mortgage product.
Again, about sustainability, if the lender feels that they're not taking too much of a risk lending you the extra money. By the way, you can staircase without the mortgage as well. If you were to inherit, you could buy an extra share that way. But if you're going to borrow and go back to the lender will do a full review on you again and see if you're good for the money, really.
And shared ownership is there. We want people to staircase and buy more shares. So as Rupi says, it's not just about the mortgage. So if you are a buyer and your household income is under 90,000 when you first start, your income doesn't have to stay under 90,000. Once you own that home, and your income goes above 90,000 in terms of promotions, pay rises, moving jobs, that is absolutely fine, and that's encouraged there. So if you do buy a property and you earn under £90,000 and then you do get that pay rise and you get a bonus and you want to then put that into your property, by all means you can do that, and you can do that before kind of the 6 months or so. But it's really just making sure that, as I say, you are comfortable with doing that, and that the land registry title's gone through. That's probably the biggest
And a lovely way to look at it is you don't have to wait until you got that big income
No.
to buy. You buy now, buy the rest later as you get promoted. We see that a lot in the NHS with doctors buying into shared ownership because they start off as a house person and then a registrar, consultant, and the income grows. And as they grow, they buy more shares in their property.
And it's lovely to know that there is that option there, because I think sometimes people do think, oh, well, I'll only ever own 25%, and you can choose to. Some people do want to just sit at 25 or increase to 50 and then kind of just stay there, but the option is there if you do want to buy more.
And there's plenty of people quite happy owning 25, 40% and living like that forever. You don't have to staircase. There's a big push, people staircasing all the time, but you don't have to. Just live happily in the same home. When you buy a bigger share, not much else changes, does it?
No. I think, as I said, there's people that are happy to do that. I think one thing to bear in mind as well, and especially at this moment, it probably does make a little bit more sense not to staircase quite so quickly. The rent that you're paying on the share that you don't own, it's usually at 2.75%. The rent does go up on an annual basis. That's one thing to bear in mind, but it goes up in line with RPI plus 0.5%. So the increments again are smaller than if you were just renting on the open market, because your landlord can come in once your tenancy agreement is finished and say, right, you now have to pay this amount of money because the market's fluctuated and there's massive demand, whereas this is more set, which is, I think, more comforting for people, so they know they can kind of really project how much their rent's going to be a year on year, which is really useful for them, and it gives them that financial stability as well.
So as with everything, it's just making the right choice for you. When you're buying, which tenure you use, so if you do go for shared ownership, which development, if you choose to staircase, it's all down to the buyer and the owner, and everyone's different, everyone has a different housing journey, and I think it's just knowing that you have all those kind of alternatives and options at your disposal. So that's brilliant. So this has been really informative, and I just think shared ownership is a fantastic product, and it really kind of gives an alternative for these eligible buyers in the capital and beyond who are looking to buy their first home. And it really sounds like Square Roots are dedicated to making homes where people want to live, where they can put down roots, and that they can afford in areas that they already love. So firstly, I just want to say thank you so much to Alex and Rupi for joining us today. This has been really, really informative. And then obviously, thank you to everyone who has joined us today and submitted questions. It's been a really insightful session. If you'd like to find out more about Square Roots, you can visit squareroots.co.uk, and then you can also subscribe to their YouTube channel. But that's everything for now, so thank you so much.